Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 3 more recently solved cold cases. Let's get into it. Number 3, Rachel Sandejas and Lisa Kondak. On January 18, 1981, 20-year-old Rachel Sandejas returned home in Camarillo, California from a nightclub called Old Huntington's near Wagon Wheel Junction. She then drove her babysitter home around 4 a.m. and never returned home. Paper carriers found Rachel the next day in the carport near her apartment. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled.
Based on the evidence left at the scene, investigators believe that Rachel was accosted as she got out of her vehicle.
Rachel Sandejas had recently moved her 2 young daughters, Eva, 2 years old, and Monica, a year old, in with her brother, Roy Rodriguez. She had dropped out of high school when she was pregnant with her first child and had recently separated from her husband. She had just started school at Oxnard College, taking a job training courses, a federally funded course designed to help homemakers who find themselves in sudden need of a job. Police had no leads, no witnesses, and no known motive. The husband had been cleared quickly, and the case went cold and had no answers. Rachel's brother called the Ventura County Sheriff's Office every year on his sister's death anniversary, begging for answers. On December 12, 1981, at around 3 a.m., a fire was reported in an apartment building near the 1200 block of West Gonzales Road in Oxnard, California. The fire department responded, and they found that a fire had started in the living room of an apartment that was deliberately set. They were shocked when they found the body of a young woman naked in the bathtub. The woman was identified as the owner of the apartment, Lisa Kondak. She had been strangled to death. Police believe that the fire was set to hide the crime, and only matches were used to start the fire.
Lisa's cause of death is being that of strangulation and suffocation.
Lisa Kondak, 21, had gone dancing at Old Huntington's nightclub near Wagon Wheel Junction the night before the fire. Originally from Connecticut, she had moved to Oxnard after coming to California to visit a friend and decided to stay. She got her apartment and was working in retail at a nearby mall. When police started to investigate, they discovered that neighbors of Lisa had heard screams for help, but no one had called 911 or gotten involved. None of these neighbors had seen who had come in or left the apartment that night. Again, there were no witnesses and no leads. In 2004, law enforcement would get their first new lead from these cases. With advances in DNA not available in 1981, they were able to connect the murder of Rachel and Lisa to one assailant, and they now knew the same person killed both of these women. Unfortunately, this didn't lead to anything new, even when they tested federal and state DNA databases, and the case would eventually go cold again. In December of 2019, Ventura County Cold Case Unit decided to look into genetic genealogy, a process used to find relatives of suspects through public DNA sites. Law enforcement has not commented on the exact steps the investigation took, but in 2023 they arrested their first suspect, 68-year-old Tony Garcia. A fresh DNA sample was taken from Garcia, which matched the DNA found on both victims. Tony Garcia lived only a few miles from both crime scenes. At the time, he was in the U.S. Navy before retiring and becoming a karate instructor. They don't know if he had frequented the nightclub both victims had been at the night before they'd been killed. In a press conference, a sheriff is quoted as saying, quote, "The fact is, this suspect has been hiding in plain sight for over 40 years. Law enforcement is still looking for information on Tony Garcia and are asking anyone who knew him around 1981 to come forward." After 42 years of waiting, Roy Rodriguez and his 2 nieces, who both now work as nurses, have some answers. They got the call that Rachel's killer was now in police custody. Roy never stopped asking and hoping for answers about what had happened to Rachel, and he never gave up seeking justice for his beloved sister.
The long arm of the law has brought justice to the Kondak and Sandejas families.
Number 2, Laurel Mitchell. It was on Wednesday, August 6, 1975, when 17-year-old Laurel Mitchell left work at 10 p.m. at the Epsworth Forest Church Camp in North Webster Lake in Kosciuszko County, Indiana. A co-worker had offered her a ride home, but she said she was going to visit friends at the Adventureland amusement park and would walk, but she never arrived. Laurel also never made it home for curfew. Her parents would report her missing early the following day. Hours later, 2 fishermen found Laurel Mitchell's body in a river 17 miles northeast of the North Webster Lake. An autopsy would show that she died from drowning, and it was initially thought to have been an accident, but a further examination of her body showed that she had several injuries consistent with defensive marks, indicating Laurel fought for her life. Her case was then investigated as a homicide. Experts at the time had believed she might have been sexually assaulted, but the evidence was inconclusive. A witness remembers seeing a 1970s Buick Oldsmobile in the area the night Laurel went missing. Authorities over multiple jurisdictions would spend hours, months, and years investigating Laurel Mitchell's murder. They would interview more than 1,000 people hoping to find out anything about what had happened to Laurel, but in the end, her case would go cold. Detectives never stopped looking. More than 40 years later, in 2014, the police asked the public for help locating a singing group that had stopped into a local firehouse, thinking that they may have seen Laurel. Unfortunately, that lead did not pan out. In 2013, an informant came forward saying that a man named John Wayne Lehman had admitted to him that he committed a crime with his friend Fred Bandy. The details were consistent with Laurel's case. In 2014, another person would come forward saying Bandy had claimed to have committed a crime that happened at Mallard's Roost, a public access site adjacent to the location where Laurel's body had been found. In 2019, they got a tip reported that this person had been at a high school party years ago when Bandy had said that he and Lehman had committed the murder of Laurel Mitchell together. Also in 2019, police resubmitted Laurel's clothing to be tested. In 2020, they would find foreign male DNA from the clothing.
Genealogy has changed the game investigatively. That's since approximately 2015 when the first case ever occurred. That has changed the game.
In 2022, a sample was taken from Bandy, and in 2023, law enforcement discovered it was a match to the unknown DNA sample found on Laurel's clothing. They also discovered that in 1975, Bandy owned a 1971 Buick Oldsmobile. On February 6, 2023, both Fred Bandy and John Wayne Lehman, both 67 now, were arrested on one count of first-degree murder. They were arrested in their respective homes without incident and are now being held without bail. It is believed that both men had picked up Laurel, offering her a ride in the Oldsmobile car, where they then took her to the river and drowned her. At this time, the motive is unclear. It is also unclear if either of these men had a criminal history or if there might be other victims. However, after 47 years, the family of Laurel Mitchell has some answers.
I just always wondered, how she would have turned out. And she got, she missed prom, she missed graduation, she missed getting married and having kids. And I didn't have anybody to share all that with, anybody to get, information, help me grow up.
In a press conference, Noble County Prosecutor Jim Mowry said in a statement,
"While the arrest of these individuals is an important step in this process, it is just a step, and this is not the end. This is just the beginning of the prosecution."
Number 1. Opal Wheel. On February 9, 1987, in St. Petersburg, Florida, 82-year-old Opal Wheel was found deceased in her bedroom. Mrs. Wheel's sister-in-law had come over that morning after she had not answered her phone. Mrs. Wheel, a widower, lived alone, but her brother and his wife lived close by, and the family was incredibly close. When her sister-in-law arrived, she peeked through the window and noticed that the nightlight in the kitchen was still on, which was odd because she knew Opal always turned it off right away when she woke up at 6 a.m. Further examination of the exterior of the home, and she noticed one of the window panes was missing from the glass in the front door. It was then that she called the police. When they arrived, Opal was found in her bedroom unresponsive. But even with only a cursory glance, officers on the scene could see that there were apparent and visible signs of trauma on Mrs. Wheel, which included severe bruising around her neck, mouth, and face. Opal Wheel was last seen alive around 12 hours earlier. Those closest to Opal described her as tall, slim, always well-dressed, a kind woman who often went on morning and afternoon walks with a few ladies from the neighborhood. Known to stop by and have a friendly chat, her brother and his wife lived a few doors down from her. Investigators discovered that the suspect had entered the house by removing a window pane and that the phone line had been cut. The forensic team used vacuums and other means back in 1987 to collect evidence and were able to collect some foreign hairs at the time. The autopsy showed that she died from strangulation and blunt force trauma. She was discovered in her bedroom in her nightgown. Neighbors were interviewed, some saying that they heard a noise and investigated outside their homes but didn't see anything. The neighbor that was behind her house reported that his dog didn't make a noise that night and would have barked if someone had been in her backyard. Some drawers in her bedroom appeared to have been quickly rummaged through. Some small jewelry items were stolen, which included her wedding ring. Robbery may have been the primary motivation. Perhaps Opal woke up when she heard noises and was killed as a result. After months of investigation with no leads, the case went cold. They didn't give up, and throughout the continued investigation, they eventually got a partial DNA profile from the evidence found at the scene. They didn't find a match until recently. In 2020, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office cold case detectives contacted the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for additional testing on the evidence. They also contacted Parabon Nanolabs, known for their genetic testing. Throughout the extensive testing, Parabon Nanolabs was able to help build family trees. Detectives were able to find relatives, and the lab was able to narrow it down to 3 possible suspects. After an extensive investigation, detectives were able to eliminate 2 of the suspects, leaving only 1. The primary suspect was discovered to have lived only half a mile from Opal Wheel at the time of the murder. Michael Lapnewski Jr. was identified as this possible suspect. He is currently living in Waveland, Mississippi. In 2022, Pinellas County detectives traveled to Mississippi to do further investigation. They did some undercover work in the hopes of getting a DNA profile. They did this in 2 ways. In July 2022, they followed Lapnewski into a gas station and they watched him open a straw, stir his coffee, and suck off the coffee from the straw, throw it in the trash. They then collected that straw and they did this several times. The second was a local detective who owned a restaurant and knew Lapnewski personally, and they offered to allow detectives to put a flyer on Lapnewski's car for a free meal at a specific time and day with proof of residency as some promotion to get people to come to the restaurant. Lapnewski showed up, ate his free meal, and left, and his utensils were saved. The straws and the utensils were tested, and his DNA matched the DNA from hairs found at the crime scene. 55-year-old Michael Lapnewski was arrested in Mississippi on January 26 and extradited to Pinellas County, where he is being charged with first-degree murder. Detectives interviewed him, and he denied being around Opal Wheel's house at the time of the murder, and he said that he did not recognize the victim from an old photo. At the time of the murder, he lived only a few blocks from Mrs. Wheel and had moved soon after the murder. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office said the investigation is ongoing. Lapnewski was booked into the Pinellas County Jail on January 31, 2023. No bond has been set at this time as he awaits trial.
As for Opal's family,
our family never gave up hope.
They say they're so grateful for the detectives' hard work, and Tracy hopes her mother gets her dying wish and that her aunt finally gets justice.
After 36 years, he's been able to walk this earth. He's been able to breathe air, something my aunt did not have the luxury of doing. And I hope that he is man enough to stand up and to confess to what he's done.
Well, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel are by joining my Patreon or channel membership. There is also merch available, and you will find all those links in the description box below, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very much appreciated. That's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.